The rise and fall of Tampa's cigar empire. There was a time when a small strip of swampland outside Tampa, Florida, produced more cigars by hand than any other place on Earth. 400 million cigars a year, rolled one at a time by hand by workers who could recite poetry, opera, and revolutionary politics without ever looking down at their fingers. Presidents smoked them. Kings smoked them. A Cuban revolutionary once stood on the factory steps and asked the workers inside to help fund a war. And then, in the span of a single generation, it was gone. The factories fell silent. The workers scattered. The city that made them forgot the names of the men who built it. This is the story of how a Spanish immigrant, a swamp, and 100,000 hands built an empire, and how that empire quietly disappeared. By the end, you'll understand why collectors still hunt for cigars that were rolled in this city over a century ago, and why one factory, against every odd, is still standing. Why this story matters: most people who know cigars know Cuba. Havana, the embargo, the mystique of an island most Americans have never been allowed to visit. Almost no one talks about Tampa. But for more than 50 years, Tampa, not Havana, was the cigar capital of the world. By 1899, nearly 24 cigar factories operated in Ybor City alone, alongside the state's first brewery and a booming business district. At the industry's peak, hundreds of factories were manufacturing millions of cigars every year under thousands of different brand names. By the early 1900s, the region was producing more than 500 million cigars annually. This wasn't a novelty industry, it was a global one. Tampa cigars sat in the humidors of statesmen and industrialists. The industry's influence ran so deep, it gave rise to the Cuban sandwich, invented to feed cigar workers on their breaks, and even helped fund a revolution. And yet today, most Americans have never heard of it. That contradiction, a global empire, built by immigrant hands, erased from popular memory, is exactly why this story deserves to be told. The origin story. Every empire needs a reason to exist. This one begins with a man running out of options. Vicente Martinez Ybor was a Spanish-born cigar manufacturer who had already built a successful business in Havana, Cuba, before political instability forced him elsewhere. He rebuilt in Key West. And for a while it worked. But Key West had problems of its own. Labor unrest, including conflict between Ybor's Spanish and Cuban workers, made the city increasingly difficult to operate in, along with persistent transportation bottlenecks that slowed his business down. So Ybor started looking for somewhere new, somewhere with a port, somewhere with rail access, somewhere he could build not just a factory but an entire world around it. On October 5, 1885, Martinez Ybor signed a contract with the Tampa Board of Trade to relocate his cigar manufacturing operation to a patch of land near a small fishing village outside the city. He purchased roughly 40 acres of undeveloped land northeast of Tampa, land chosen specifically for its easy access to a port for importing Cuban tobacco and shipping finished cigars, and its proximity to the railroads that would carry them out. He didn't just build a factory. Ybor and his fellow manufacturers were given near total control over the planning and construction of the surrounding town, homes, businesses, and all, modeled after the company town developments other industrialists were building at the time. Local wetlands were drained to make way for it. In 1886, that town got a name, Ybor City. But here's the detail almost nobody knows. Ybor's factory wasn't actually the first to produce a cigar there. That honor belongs to a rival company, Sanchez Yhaya, which opened its doors on 7th Avenue and rolled the first cigar in Ybor City on April 13, 1886. Ignacio Haya, one of the company's owners, had partnered with Ybor in building this new city, but it was his factory, not Ybor's, that technically claimed the historic first roll. Sanchez Yhaya's factory produced the very first clear Havana cigars ever made in Ybor City. Two rival manufacturers, one town, one race to be first. That rivalry, cooperative on the surface, competitive underneath, would define the culture of the entire industry for the next 50 years. The Golden Age. Word spread fast. Ybor City wasn't just a factory town, it was a promise. Skilled cigar workers from Cuba heard that steady work and better wages waited in Florida, and they came by the thousands. Immigrants from Cuba, Spain, and Italy poured into the new city, filling factories that seemed to spring up overnight. These workers were known as torcedores, highly skilled artisans who hand-rolled every single cigar, a meticulous craft passed down through generations. And this is where Ybor City did something no other cigar town in the world had done. Inside these factories, while hundreds of torcedores rolled tobacco leaf by leaf, a single worker sat on an elevated platform above the factory floor and read aloud newspapers, novels, political essays, revolutionary manifestos for hours at a time, while the rollers worked in silence below. They called this figure the Lector. The workers themselves voted on what would be read and paid the Lector's salary out of their own wages. It meant cigar rollers, many with almost no formal education, could recite Cervantes, debate European politics, and follow the Cuban independence movement in real time, all while working with their hands. This wasn't just entertainment, it built one of the most politically engaged, radicalized workforces in American labor history, and it explains what happened next. In 1893, a Cuban revolutionary named Jose Marti climbed the steps of the Ybor factory and gave a speech to the workers inside, not to sell them anything, but to raise money for the fight for Cuban independence from Spain. The workers who heard him weren't just cigar rollers, they were part of a movement. Tampa's cigar workers would go on to fund and support the Cuban revolutionary cause for years, turning factory floors into informal headquarters for a war being fought 100 miles away across open water. By 1900, Tampa's population had exploded from just 720 residents in 1880 to nearly 16,000, driven overwhelmingly by the wave of Cuban, Spanish, and Sicilian immigrants the cigar industry pulled in. Ybor City's true golden age arrived in the 1910s and the 1920s, when the industry was producing over 400 million hand-rolled cigars a year. To put that in perspective, for a decade and a half, one immigrant neighborhood outside Tampa, Florida, was arguably the single largest concentration of hand-rolled cigar production the world has ever seen. But behind the numbers, behind the speeches, and the smoke-filled factory floors, something was already starting to shift. The hidden story. What made Ybor City remarkable wasn't just the cigars. It was the social infrastructure the workers built for themselves because nobody else was going to. Cuban, Spanish, Italian, and Afro-Cuban immigrants formed mutual aid societies, cooperative organizations that pooled worker dues to provide something almost no other American factory town offered its immigrant labor force in the early 1900s: healthcare, clinics, even hospitals. These societies became the backbone of Ybor City's identity, social clubs, cultural centers, and insurance systems rolled into one. It was, in many ways, a workers' utopia built almost entirely by immigrant hands, with no help from the factory owners who profited from their labor. But that same political consciousness, the Lector-fed radicalism, the union organizing, the revolutionary sympathies, put workers on a collision course with the men who owned the factories. In November and December of 1931, in the depths of the Great Depression, Ybor City's cigar workers staged one of the most significant strikes in the industry's history. This wasn't a spontaneous walkout, it grew out of decades of increasingly militant labor and management relations that stretched all the way back to the 1880s, when Cuban immigrants first began building Florida's cigar industry. With unemployment rising and wages collapsing under the Depression, members of the Tobacco Workers' Industrial Union staged radical demonstrations, including notably public commemorations of the anniversary of the Russian Revolution. Factory owners, alarmed by the growing radicalism inside their own buildings, made a decision that would end a 50-year tradition. The most lasting consequence of the 1931 strike was the permanent end of the Lector culture. The voice that had educated and politicized generations of cigar workers was silenced for good. The workers lost their newspaper, their novelist, their historian. And with that voice gone, something in the culture of Ybor City changed forever. The fall. The Lector's silence was a warning sign. What came next was the collapse itself. The Great Depression devastated the cigar industry outright, as demand for luxury goods, and a hand-rolled cigar was at its core a luxury good, collapsed almost overnight. Factories shuttered, unemployment soared, families who had built their entire lives around the industry were left with nothing. And even as the economy eventually recovered, the industry itself did not, because the ground had shifted beneath it. Mechanization displaced the torcedores who had once been irreplaceable, as factories increasingly turned to machines that could roll cigars faster and cheaper than any human hand. At the same time, cigarettes emerged as a cheaper, more convenient alternative, and American consumer habits began shifting away from cigars altogether. The rising cost of both tobacco and labor eventually pushed the majority of Tampa's cigar companies to abandon the city entirely, relocating to countries where operating costs were far lower. Urban renewal projects in the mid-20th century added another blow, tearing through industrial areas like Ybor City and accelerating factory closures and relocations. Longtime residents moved away in search of new opportunities. Abandoned buildings became a common sight on streets that had once employed tens of thousands. The Lector's platform, once the political heartbeat of the factory floor, sat empty in buildings nobody used anymore. An industry that had defined an entire American city for 50 years quietly, almost invisibly, came apart. The collector's hunt. Here's what most people don't expect. A handful of Tampa's cigar names never actually died. Some of the era's original brand names survived the collapse and are still produced today. Names like Bering, Cuesta Rey, Garcia, Y Vega, and Don Vicente. These aren't reproductions, they're direct descendants of an industry most people assume vanished completely. And one family did something almost nobody else managed. They didn't just survive the fall, they moved deeper into it. J.C. Newman, founded in 1895, relocated its operations to Tampa in 1954, taking over the historic Regensburg factory building that had originally been constructed in 1910. That company still makes cigars in Tampa today on machinery dating back to the 1930s, meaning some of the equipment currently producing Tampa cigars predates the Great Depression that nearly destroyed the industry entirely. Elsewhere in the Old District, Sweetheart Cigars features cigars rolled by descendants of Arturo Fuente, one of the pillars of the entire cigar-making tradition, while premium cigar retailers like Davidoff of Geneva have since opened flagship stores in Tampa's West Shore district. For collectors, that continuity is the whole draw. Unlike Havana, where the revolution created a hard historical break, Tampa's story doesn't have a clean ending. Original factory buildings still stand, some original brand names are still in production. Vintage boxes from the Golden Age factories occasionally surface in estate sales and private collections. Remnants of an era when a cigar box wasn't packaging, it was branding art, lithographed and labeled by hand. Historians and collectors still debate exactly how many of those original factories' output survives in any meaningful quantity today, and precise figures on rare vintage examples are difficult to verify. Much of what circulates is anecdotal, passed down through estate sales rather than documented in any central archive. What isn't in question is the cultural weight those surviving names and buildings still carry. Even the culture the industry left behind refused to disappear. The story of Ybor City's cigar workers eventually inspired Anna in the Tropics, a Pulitzer Prize-winning play set inside the factories, keeping the memory of the Lector tradition alive for audiences who never smoked a single hand-rolled cigar. The legacy and final reveal. So why does any of this matter now? 140 years after a Spanish immigrant bought 40 acres of Florida swampland. Because Tampa's cigar empire wasn't destroyed by one villain, one war, or one single decision. It was undone by the same forces that quietly end most empires: shifting consumer tastes, cheaper competition abroad, and a generation that simply stopped looking back. What remains today are boutiques where those enormous factories once stood. Smaller, quieter, but still producing cigars by hand the same way they have since 1886. The mutual aid societies that once held the community together have become historical landmarks rather than living institutions. And the Lector's voice, the thing that made Tampa's workforce unlike any other cigar-producing city on Earth, has been silent for nearly a century. But walk down 7th Avenue in Ybor City today, and you can still watch a torcedor roll a cigar exactly the way it was done in 1886. You can still buy a cigar from a brand whose name predates the Great Depression. You can still stand on the same factory steps where a revolutionary once asked immigrant laborers to help free a country most of them had never returned to. Some empires disappear because the world forgets them. This one didn't disappear, it just went quiet, waiting for someone to notice it was never really gone.